the rural landscape, cables, paracord, and clothesline. These were all signs of the cruelty inflicted upon her. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, as residents grappled with the realization that such brutality could happen in their midst. Law enforcement agencies, including the McDonald County Sheriff's Office, Horner's Office, Missouri State Highway Patrol, Benton County, Arkansas Sheriff's Office, and University of Arkansas anthropologists, all came together in pursuit of justice for Grace Doe. Detectives were told that it may be by the grace of God that her identity would be found. Despite the meticulous examination of the crime scene and the tireless efforts of investigators, the identity of the victim remained a baffling mystery. The circumstances surrounding her demise, a possible assault, and a brutal slaying, estimated to have occurred approximately 2 months prior to her discovery, only gave investigators more questions that they had no answers to. The presence of military-grade paracord among the bindings did offer a clue. In the 1990s, it was exclusively sold to the military. Detective Lori Howard, who worked the case for years, also uncovered a disturbing detail. A 10-year-old boy had reported that he had been arrested for the murder of a young boy he reportedly stumbled upon the remains about a month before the Growlers, but his claims were dismissed by his family. Unfortunately, the boy's identity and the exact timing of his discovery remained unknown, leaving uncertainty surrounding the timeline of events. Later speculated that the victim was likely brought to the location rather than being kept there. The remote road, though secluded, was not far from state highways in 1990, making it accessible, but not necessarily familiar to the perpetrator. Investigators initially believed that the perpetrator was from the area, but later reconsidered, suggesting that they might not have known the farmhouse well. Over the years, Sheriffs Schlesman, Evanson, and Hall continued efforts to solve the case, and more than 200 leads were investigated, but none produced solid evidence. The case went cold, and detectives continued to search for Grace Doe's identity with little success. Grace Doe's profile was entered into NamUs, Cody's, and the University of North Texas Center for Human Remains. No matches were found. In 2009, Detective Howard collaborated with a facial reconstruction expert and an FBI instructor to create an accurate likeness of Grace Doe. This image was circulated nationwide, generating numerous tips. Although there were many suggestions about her possible identity, her true name remained a mystery. One of the artist's renditions of Grace Doe that the sheriff's office circulated brought renewed attention to the case. In a bid to further the investigation, investigators partnered with Othram to identify possible relatives of the deceased. This partnership would eventually lead to significant breakthroughs in the case. In January 2021, Othram provided information on potential relatives identified through genealogy research. Investigators contacted Danielle Pixler, who revealed that she had a half-sister, Shauna Garber, who had been in foster care. Danielle had been searching for Shauna for over 28 years. Danielle agreed to provide a DNA sample, which was collected by the Topeka, Kansas Police Department and sent to Othram for familial testing. After years of searching, in March 2021, the DNA confirmed that Grace Doe was Shauna Beth Garber. Shauna was born on March 1, 1968, in Lola, Kansas. Sadly, much of Shauna's life was as tragic as her demise. As the youngest of 3 siblings, Shauna's early years were marred by severe abuse at the hands of her mother. Living in Topeka, Kansas with her parents and 2 half-siblings, Shauna experienced unimaginable cruelty. One horrific incident saw her mother douse her in lighter fluid and setting her on fire, an act of brutality that resulted in all 3 children being placed into foster care. The separation from her family led to a fragmented childhood for Shauna. At only 6 years old, her half-siblings were sent to different homes, and contact with her family was lost. Despite the abuse and upheaval, Shauna demonstrated remarkable strength and tenacity. A failed adoption put her back into the foster care system, where she aged out. This led her to seek out family connections of her adopted family in the Veneta or Claremore area of Oklahoma. Shauna's adult life remained challenging, and she participated in a work program that provided transportation to and from her job at Hudson Foods. This program eventually led her to McDonald County, Missouri, where her life would come to a tragic and violent end. Shauna was 22 years old when her remains were found in December 1990. While investigators were glad to know for certain Shauna's identity, the frantic search for the person behind the tragedy continued. The McDonald County Sheriff's Office embarked on the next phase of the investigation, aiming to piece together Shauna's life from the time she aged out of the foster care system to the moment her remains were discovered. Lieutenant Hall and his team sought any information that could shed light on Shauna's movements and associations during her adult years. Hall believed Shauna may have been living in southeast Kansas or Joplin, Missouri, and possibly used the name Shauna Harvey. The hope was that learning more about her adult life could provide crucial clues to her untimely demise. A significant aspect of the investigation involved revisiting old leads and re-interviewing potential witnesses. Detective Lori Howard learned of a possible witness, a woman who, as a teenager, had reported hearing a scream in the vicinity on Halloween night in 1990. She and her friends were at a house down the road when a truck with a loud muffler drove by. They went outside to investigate and heard two vehicle doors open, followed by a scream. Then a single door slammed and the truck drove off. Whether this incident was related to the demise of Gray Stowe was uncertain. The fact that the truck sped away quickly suggests the area might have been used simply as a dump site, but the witness's report of a scream complicates this theory. The scream implies that the victim might have been alive at the site. One theory that detectives pursued was the involvement of known serial perpetrators. Notably, BTK or Dennis Rader was considered a potential suspect due to his history of binding his victims in a similar manner. Rader, a city code inspector in Kansas, was arrested in February 2005 and would ultimately confess to 10 slayings in the Wichita area. He would be sentenced in August 2005 to 10 consecutive life prison terms. While there was no direct evidence linking Rader to Shauna, investigators did not rule out the possibility and interviewed him as part of their comprehensive review of the case. When Sheriff Rob Vinson spoke to him, Rader denied any involvement in Shauna's case. As the investigation continued, the diligent efforts of investigators eventually led to the identification of a suspect. Talfay Reeves was well known to law enforcement and had a reputation within the local community. Reeves lost his life at 58 years old from injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident. According to detectives, they believe Reeves had allegedly picked Shauna up from the Tanglewood or Ginger Blue area along Missouri State Highway 59. Then he would bind her wrists and feet in a hogtied position before moving her to the abandoned farmhouse, where her remains would eventually be discovered. There, it is believed, he assaulted her and administered a fatal overdose. While Reeves' passing prevented the possibility of bringing him to justice, investigators were confident in the evidence pointing to him as the person responsible for brutally cutting Shauna's life short. Statements from witnesses and sources combined with physical evidence built a compelling case against him. Reeves had been on law enforcement's radar since the beginning as he was a menace to the community and served time in prison. However, there never was any evidence to tie him to the victim or the crime scene. That is until he passed away. People were now no longer afraid to talk to the police. In 2024, the detectives were able to confirm Reeves was Shauna's perpetrator through 6 corroborated sources and a witness who came forward. Detective Lori Howard said of her last conversation with Reeves, "I went to his house and said to him, 'Before you pass away, I want to be your last phone call. Because I want to know what happened to her.'" He laughed and he smiled. That was pretty much the extent of what I got from him verbally. If he had been alive, charges in the first degree would have been sought from the McDonald County prosecuting attorney. The identification of Talfay Reeves as the man who ended the life of Shauna Garber Harvey marked the end of a decades-long investigation. Detectives Howard and Wise, along with their predecessors and colleagues, had dedicated countless hours to solving this case. Their tenacity and the support from forensic experts, law enforcement partners, and the community played crucial roles in finding answers that evaded them for so many years. The McDonald County Sheriff's Office expressed gratitude to everyone who contributed to keeping Shauna's story alive over the past 30 years. The combination of advanced DNA technology, forensic genealogy, and diligent detective work ultimately led to this breakthrough. It changed the case status from an open investigation to being cleared by exception. "I was 3 months old when we all got taken from my mom," She blames her mother for what happened to Shauna. Rob Ringwald, her brother, said, "Growing up without her, there was always just a hole in my life that I could not fill." Rob said Shauna was born 2 days before his second birthday. When he turned 18, he started looking for her. When he got married, his wife made it a mission. It was devastating just to find out that she had been sitting in a box for 30 years. Once Shauna's remains were identified, they buried her in Buckland next to her great-nephew. Though Shauna's life and demise were a tragedy, finding the truth provides some measure of closure for her loved ones and those that never stopped seeking justice on her behalf. In the late 1980s, Virginia's serene colonial... In the quiet dawn of September 23, 1987, the shores of Virginia's Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge bear witness to a violent tragedy. 20-year-old salesman David Lee Nobling and 14-year-old lifeless and washed ashore by the unforgiving tide. Their story began on September 19 when Robin slipped out of her house to rendezvous with David at an arcade, a seemingly innocent act that would lead to their untimely demise. Days later, their bodies were found on the south shore of the James River in Isle of. They were approximately 100 feet apart, both victims of gunshot wounds. The gruesome scene painted a harrowing picture. Robin was shot execution-style in the back of her head, while David was struck twice, once in the head and once in the shoulder. Both were found partially clothed, with Robin's jeans unfastened and her bra around her neck. Investigators theorized that she could have been assaulted, but were unsure since it seemed that despite her being underage, she may have had an intimate relationship with David. Adding to the mystery was the discovery of David's black Ford Ranger just 2 days prior parked eerily at the refuge's parking area. The vehicle, with its wipers, engine, and radio still running, or signs of a staged scene. The open doors and partially rolled-down window fueled speculation. Had the perpetrator posed as a uniformed officer to lure the unsuspecting victims? The presence of David's wallet within the vehicle ruled out robbery, leaving investigators grappling with elusive motives. While they could not make sense of why this happened, they immediately linked the case to another, fearing that the same person may be behind it. As investigators delved into the chilling slaying of David Nobling and Robin Edwards, they found themselves drawn back to another dark chapter. A year prior, on October 12, 1986, the lifeless bodies of Kathleen Marion Kathy Thomas and Rebecca and Becky Dowski were discovered. Much like David Nobling and Robin Edwards, Kathy and Becky were young lovers whose lives had been brutally cut short. Both Kathy, a 27-year-old United States Naval Academy graduate, and Becky, a 21-year-old College of William and Mary Sr., had vanished after leaving a computer lab at William and Mary on October 9. The grim discovery of their bodies, their throats slashed so deeply they were nearly decapitated, painted a picture of unspeakable horror. Autopsy findings revealed the disturbing details of their demise. Rope burns on their necks and wrists, signs of strangulation, and the heinous act of slashing their throats. The perpetrator, with callous disregard, covered their bodies and the vehicle with diesel fuel, yet stopped short from setting them ablaze. Despite the presence of over 100 latent and full prints, the perpetrator remained elusive, their identity shrouded in mystery. The absence of evidence of assault and the location of both women's purses within the vehicle ruled out robbery as a motive. Blood found inside the car led authorities to believe that the slayings had occurred elsewhere, further complicating the already baffling crime. The reason investigators believed all 4 slayings were connected was because the victims were all young couples targeted in or around Lovers Lane areas, with both locations only a 30-minute drive apart. Unfortunately, after David and Robin's case, even more people would fall victim under eerily similar circumstances. On April 10, 1988, Christopher Newport University students 18-year-old Cassandra Lee Haley and 20-year-old Richard Keith Call vanished after attending a party in Newport News. Cassandra had left her family's residence in Grafton the previous day for their first date, traveling in Richard's red 1982 Toyota Celica. The next day, Richard's unoccupied vehicle was discovered at the York River overlook in Yorktown, with their belongings inside but their purses and wallet missing. Although there were initial theories of drowning, no sign of them was found after an extensive search of the river, leading to suspicions of foul play. A year later, on September 5, 1989, 18-year-old Anna Maria Phelps and her boyfriend's brother, 22-year-old Daniel Lauer, disappeared while en route to Virginia Beach, in New Kent County. Inside the vehicle, Anna Maria's purse was found, ruling out robbery. Then, on October 19th, their bodies were discovered by hunters in a wooded area along Interstate 64 between Williamsburg and Richmond. Though the cause of demise remained undetermined due to decomposition, evidence suggested possible Anna Maria's bones and abdomen. A note found in Anna Maria's apartment in 2010 hinted at a mysterious meeting at a rest stop. Despite exhaustive efforts by law enforcement, including searches of the areas where the victims were last seen and appeals to the public for information, crucial leads remained elusive. Until January 2024, when authorities announced a significant development. DNA evidence conclusively linked the slayings of David Knobling and Robin Edwards to a man named Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. He was a local fisherman who had passed away in December 2017 at the age of 63. He owned a small 1976 wooden commercial fishing boat called the Denny Wade. During the time of the slayings, he worked as a fisherman, farming clams and oysters. He also ran a business called Better Tree Service. He was also known to be an avid hunter and belonged to a hunt club in the Middle Peninsula region. Wilmer had no felonies on his criminal record, so his DNA was never put into the system. However, in the fresh probe of the cold cases, authorities looked into Wilmer as a suspect. When they learned he had passed away, they legally obtained his genetic material and submitted it to the Forensic Science Department to compare it to the evidence collected in the slayings. Virginia State Police would not say what led to the sudden decision to test Wilmer's DNA profile, but he was the prime suspect in 1988 of the slayings of Cassandra Lee Halley and Richard Keith Call, one case of the Colonial Parkway slayings. His distinct blue truck with the license plate M. Raw was matched as belonging to a peeping Tom on the Colonial Parkway in 1988, and even got a warrant to search his trailer. Ultimately, Wilmer passed an FBI polygraph and police moved on to other leads. He is now again the prime suspect in this case. Cassandra and Richard's bodies are still missing, so DNA testing has been hampered. In 2024, they also linked his DNA to the case of Teresa Howell. Teresa Lynn Spa Howell's demise on July 1, 1989, outside the Zodiac Club in Hampton, or eerie similarities to the other slayings. At 10 a.m. that same day, construction crews working in the 500 block of Butler Farm Road found female clothing. This is about 11 miles from where Robin and David were found nearly 2 years before. The remains of an unidentified female were found a short time later in a wood line not far from the clothing. 3 days later, on July 4th, a missing person report filed in York County led to the identification of 29-year-old Teresa. Like the other victims, she had been assaulted and strangled. The connection between her slaying and the Colonial Parkway victims was strengthened by the DNA evidence linking Wilmer to the crimes. With Alan Wilmer identified as the perpetrators in the slayings of David Knobling, Robin Edwards, and Teresa Howell, it brings a small sense of closure to a decades-long investigation that had left family and authorities searching for answers. That if Wilmer were alive, charges would be filed against him in connection with the 3 slayings. Virginia State Police and the FBI are now asking the public for information about Wilmer to see if he is possibly linked to more cases. One Hampton Roads Police Department recently checked Wilmer's DNA to see if he was a match for one of their unsolved cold cases. Another local police department is currently reviewing all assault cases that match Wilmer's modus operandi. And a third local police department spent part of January reviewing more than a dozen cold cases from the 1970s and 80s to see if Wilmer was ever on their radar, and whether he could be considered a suspect today. But a legal loophole is leaving a potential trail of unsolved crimes unexplored. Virginia State Police says state law requires someone to have a conviction on their record before their DNA profile is entered into the government-run CODIs. And a conviction is something that this man will never have. Although DNA evidence has not yet been confirmed for all cases, law enforcement remains dedicated to exploring all avenues and leveraging advancements in forensic technology to bring closure to these unsolved cases. Media coverage of the Colonial Parkway slayings has been extensive over the years, with various outlets and platforms shedding light on the unsolved cases and the ongoing investigations. A joint statement from the Nobbling and Edwards families were released, which thanked the statement said, "For 36 years, our families have lived in a vacuum of the unknown. We have lived with the fear of worrying that a person capable of deliberately taking the lives of Robin and David could attack and claim another victim. Now we have a sense of relief and justice, knowing that he can no longer victimize another. His passing will not allow us to seek out the answers to countless questions that have haunted us for so long." How could a cherished 96-year-old woman fall victim to a brutal crime? What sinister motives lurk behind the facade of friendship and trust? Violet Evelyn Alberts was a vibrant woman beloved by her community. Her tragic demise on May 27, 2022, uncovered a web of deceit and greed. How did her life, filled with warmth and joy, come to such a shocking end? Violet Evelyn Alberts was a 96-year-old widow staying in Montecito, California. She did not have any immediate family nearby. Violet relied on her friendships and connections within the neighborhood to achieve a sense of belonging in the tight-knit community. Her home was a cozy, welcoming space, where she often hosted gatherings, sharing stories and laughter with her neighbors. She had a particular fondness for gardening, and her well-tended flowers were a colorful highlight of the neighborhood. However, on May 27, 2022, Violet Evelyn Alberts was found lifeless in her bed by her caretaker. The ingredients to make cookies were found on the kitchen table, which she planned to bake in celebration of her upcoming birthday. The caretaker had arrived that morning, as usual, to assist Violet with her daily activities, only to be confronted with a scene of horror. One of the windows in Violet's home was shattered, indicating a forced entry. The immediate arrival of local law enforcement set off a thorough investigation. An autopsy later revealed that Violet had lost her life by asphyxiation, and it was determined that her life was taken. This grim discovery shattered the peace of the tight-knit community, plunging them into grief and fear. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they uncovered a tangled, evil web of financial exploitation against Violet. It became evident that her vibrant personality and warm demeanor had unfortunately made her a target for those with malicious intentions. Detectives discovered irregularities in Violet's financial records, suggesting that someone had been systematically draining her accounts over several months. Suspicion quickly fell on individuals who had recently come into her life, posing as friends or helpers, but with ulterior motives. The scheme began when Violet, who was in a financially distressful situation, was approached by Pauline Macarena. Macarena was a 48-year-old woman who offered to sell her a reverse mortgage on her valuable home. Her home was valued between $4 and $11 million at the time of her slaying. Violet, trusting Macarena's seemingly sincere offer, believed this financial arrangement would provide her with the funds she needed while allowing her to stay in her beloved home. However, Macarena had sinister intentions. She executed a series of fraudulent transactions, including forging documents and establishing bogus entities. This was all aimed at illegally gaining control over Violet's property. Investigators soon uncovered that Macarena was the central figure in a manipulating and deceitful scheme targeting Violet. They uncovered forged documents and sham corporations. Pauline Macarena, the mastermind behind the fraud, was then arrested in 2022 and sentenced to 6 years in state prison. But who took the life of Violet? Detectives followed many leads, but it did not look as if it would be an easy case to solve. Detectives meticulously reviewed hours of surveillance footage from cameras located around Violet's neighborhood. In June 2023, the sheriff's office issued several public appeals with information on a suspected vehicle captured by nearby surveillance videos. A $10,000 cash reward was offered to anyone who had information that could lead to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for her slaying. As the investigation unfolded, detectives discovered even more disturbing evidence. It became clear that Violet had not just been the victim of financial fraud, but was also the target of a slain-for-hire plot. This revelation added a chilling layer to the case, painting a picture of cold, calculated evil. Pauline Macarena had grown impatient, perceiving Violet as an obstacle to her plans. In Macarena's eyes, Violet was living too long, delaying the full realization of her fraudulent schemes. Driven by greed, Macarena decided to expedite her plan by orchestrating Violet's demise. The investigation revealed that Macarena had meticulously planned every detail of her fraudulent plot. She had hired a hitman to eliminate Violet, believing that her demise would allow her to swiftly finalize the transfer of the property into her own name. The depth of her deceit was astonishing, as she had created an intricate web of lies and manipulations to cover her tracks. Law enforcement officials worked tirelessly to unravel the full extent of Macarena's crimes. The case was a stark reminder of the lengths to which some individuals will go in their pursuit of wealth, displaying a shocking disregard for human life. Now the detectives have to find the people hired by Macarena to take the life of Violet. After 10,424 hours of investigating, a breakthrough came in early 2024. The identification of the suspect's vehicle, a review of surveillance camera footage, and forensic analysis of the crime scene were pivotal in leading investigators to the suspects. The investigation led to the arrest of a 58-year-old man, Harry Basmagian, in January 2024. Basmagian, already in federal custody in Los Angeles on an unrelated charge, was implicated for his alleged involvement in the conspiracy to slay Violet. His arrest underscored the complexity and reach of the criminal network orchestrated by Macarena. Basmagian suffered a medical emergency and is on an artificial life support machine as he no longer has any brain function. His apprehension provided law enforcement with further insights into the conspiracy and the roles played by each individual involved. Shortly after, on March 5, 2024, 41-year-old Ricardo Martin Del Campo was also arrested. The vehicle belonged to him. When sheriff's deputies attempted to place Martin Del Campo under arrest, he and an associate and discarded firearms that were later found by deputies. Martin Del Campo's firearm was later determined to be a Glock semi-automatic pistol that had been illegally modified, essentially turning it into a pistol with a 30-round magazine that functioned like a machine gun. Just 3 days before Violet was found, two of the men, Martin Del Campo and Rostamayan, had gone on a scouting trip to Violet's home. This pivotal discovery shed light on the premeditated nature of the crime, underscoring the perpetrator's calculated efforts to survey Violet's home and plan their vicious and reprehensible actions. Investigators pieced together that the scouting trip was a critical step in the execution of the slain-for-hire plot, orchestrated by Macarena. It revealed the lengths to which Macarena and her accomplices were willing to go to ensure the success of their malevolent scheme. Both Rostamayan and Martin Del Campo are currently being held at the Santa Barbara County Jail without bail on charges of slaying and conspiracy to slay Violet Alberts. Fingerprints and DNA samples collected from the broken window and other areas of Violet's matched those of Martin Del Campo and Rostamayan. Additionally, digital forensics played a significant role in the investigation. Investigators uncovered incriminating text messages and emails between the suspects and Pauline Macarena discussing the logistics of the slave-for-hire plot and the financial exploitation scheme. These communications provided a clear motive and detailed the premeditated nature of the crime. Macarena now faces additional pending charges, indicating that her legal troubles are far from over. These new charges are expected to encompass her deeper involvement in the slave-for-hire plot and the extensive financial exploitation of Violet. And Basmagian marked significant progress in bringing all those responsible for Violet's demise to justice. The community, still reeling from the loss of a beloved member, found solace in the relentless pursuit of the perpetrators by law enforcement. What happens when a person disappears without a trace? Should it be presumed that they have lost their life? And how do we find closure for those left behind? On May 12, 1972, the skeletal remains of an unidentified man were discovered on the south side of Winter Haven, Florida, in a remote marshy area just east of Tampa. The grim find was made by a fisherman, who immediately alerted local authorities. Investigators rushed to the scene and began the arduous task of piecing together the mystery of the man's demise. Upon examination, the investigators determined that the remains belonged to a male between the ages of 40 and 50. The skeletal structure suggested he had been a robust individual, weighing approximately 180 pounds and standing about 6 feet tall. Despite the advanced state of decomposition, which had stripped away much of the evidence and might have provided a clearer identity, the investigators were able to discern crucial details about his final moments. A forensic autopsy revealed that the man had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Violent end that left no doubt about the manner of demise. There were no personal belongings or distinguishing features that can immediately lead to his identification, presenting a daunting challenge for the investigators. The case of the unidentified man became a cold case, shrouded in mystery and filled with unanswered questions. Who was he? How did he end up in such a remote area? And most importantly, who was responsible for his brutal slaying? These questions lingered, casting a shadow of the marshlands where his body had been found. Without any leads or witnesses, deputies were unable to identify the victim. Despite their best efforts, the case went cold, and the unidentified man was buried as John Doe. He was buried at Lakeside Memorial Cemetery in Winter Haven. In January 1974, a prisoner named Charles Williams opened a crucial door for detectives working on the case. Williams, seeking perhaps a lighter sentence or simply wanting to clear his conscience, provided investigators with information that could shed light on the mysterious slaying. According to Williams, while he was incarcerated at Rayford Prison, he befriended a fellow inmate named Clarence Ingram. During their conversations, Ingram revealed chilling details about a crime he had committed alongside a man named Edgar Todd. Ingram confided to Williams that they had encountered a man in a bar and after some drinks and conversation, drove off with him in the victim's white Chevy. As they traveled, an argument erupted between the 2 men and their victim. Ingram told Williams that the argument escalated to violence, and they shot the man twice in the head. They then disposed of the body near a canal in Eloise, so the turtles would eat him. They found tools worth $1,000 to $1,500 in the victim's vehicle, and sold them to Ingram's brother. Para then drove to Keeler, Michigan, where they sold the car for $500. Williams' account included specific details that piqued the interest of detectives, particularly the mention of the vehicle having a Georgia license plate. This information led investigators to cross-reference missing persons reports from Georgia around the time of the incident. The case went cold. In February 2017, in a renewed effort to solve the decades-old mystery, the victim's body was exhumed to obtain a DNA sample. The exhumation was conducted with the hope that modern forensic techniques could finally provide answers about the identity of the man found in Winter Haven. The DNA extracted from the remains was sent to the University of North Texas, a leading institution in forensic science. Collaborating with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, investigators collected family reference samples from relatives of Lewis House, another missing person from Georgia who matched the physical description of the John Doe. However, the testing revealed that the victim was not Lewis House. This was a significant but disappointing development, as it meant the search for John Doe's true identity had to continue. The victim's DNA was subsequently entered into Cody's. Unfortunately, there were no matching profiles, leaving the victim's identity a mystery once again. In November 2023, investigators decided to leverage the latest advancements in forensic genetic genealogy, a method that had successfully solved numerous cold cases in recent years. A part of the victim's femur bone was sent to Othram. The private lab's analysis began with the meticulous extraction and sequencing of the DNA from the femur bone. Geneticists then compared this DNA to profiles available in public databases, seeking matches that could provide clues about the victim's ancestry and familial connections. In April 2024, Othram provided detectives with a crucial report suggesting that the unidentified victim could be Mac Lavelle Proctor. This potential breakthrough was based on extensive forensic genetic genealogy analysis, bringing investigators closer to solving the long-standing mystery of the remains found in Winter Haven. Armed with this new information, investigators reached out to Mac's son, Wright Proctor, in 1972 in Georgia. Wright provided additional context about his father's life, mentioning that Mac was a master mechanic known for his gentle nature and skilled craftsmanship. On May 5, 2024, detectives received a conclusive report from Othram. The report confirmed that Wright Proctor was indeed the biological son of Mac Lavelle, definitively identifying Mac as the victim discovered in Winter Haven back in 1972. This identification was a monumental step forward, bringing long-awaited answers to a case that had perplexed investigators and haunted Mac's family for decades. Mac was born on November 28, 1914. His talent for fixing anything with an engine made him a beloved figure in his community, where he was always ready to lend a helping hand. Despite his quiet and kind nature, his life took a tragic turn when he mysteriously disappeared. The exact date of his disappearance remains unclear, adding to the mystery surrounding his fate. Was never formally reported as missing to law enforcement, leaving a gaping void in the record and complicating efforts to investigate his case. His family, perhaps due to a combination of fear, confusion, and the social norms of the time, did not reach out to the authorities. Further details from Mac's family revealed that, as a master mechanic, Mac would have likely carried his tools with him in the vehicle. This information correlated with the earlier account provided by Charles Williams, who had relayed that Clarence Ingram and Edgar Todd had sold the victim's tools after the slaying. With Mac's identity confirmed, investigators shifted their focus to building a case against Ingram and Todd, and the newfound evidence bolstered the detectives' belief that they were on the right track. The connection between the white Chevy with a Georgia license plate and Mac further strengthened the case. As part of the cold case unit's thorough investigation into Mac's demise, detectives delved into the backgrounds of the suspects implicated by Charles Williams, one of the primary suspects who had allegedly shot Mac and disposed of his body had passed away in 2015. Clarence Wallace Ingram, Todd's accomplice in the crime, had passed away even earlier in 1995. This meant that both men directly involved in the slaying were no longer available to face prosecution for their heinous act. Johnny Lee Ingram, who reportedly purchased the stolen tools from Ingram and Todd, had passed away in 2003. This information closed another potential avenue for obtaining first-hand testimony or further evidence that could link the suspects directly to the crime. The inability to bring Clarence Wallace, Ingram, and Edgar Todd to trial was a significant disappointment, particularly for Mac's family, who had hoped to see justice served. However, the identification of Mac's remains and the uncovering of the circumstances surrounding his demise provided a measure of closure. In the suburbs of Gainesville, Florida, a typical summer evening took a tragic turn in 2010. 16-year-old Sebastian Oxenius was fatally shot in his own home while innocently playing video games with a friend. For almost 14 years, his family and community grappled with unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Developments in the case offered a renewed sense of hope for closure and justice in this long-standing mystery. Sebastian Oxenius was a vibrant and promising 16-year-old, deeply cherished by his family and admired by his peers. A dedicated student at Buckholtz High School, Sebastian excelled academically, consistently ranking near the top of his class. He found joy in wrestling, where his determination and hard work made him a standout athlete. Described as methodical and hardworking, Sebastian's approach to life reflected his commitment to excellence in all endeavors. But there was more to Sebastian and his academic and athletic achievements. Sebastian was beloved for his kindness, generosity, and unwavering loyalty to his family and friends. The content of his character made his unfortunate fate that much more tragic. On the evening of June 29, 2010, the Oxenius family home would be shattered by a harrowing act of violence that would forever alter all of their lives. That day, Sebastian, along with his brother Boris Oxenius Jr., spent several hours helping Boris move into his new home. Later that evening, Sebastian's friend Brian Hull joined him at their home, eager to have a night of casual gaming. As the hours slipped by and day turned into night, Sebastian and Brian found themselves engrossed in a popular video game. Frustrated by the game's challenges, Sebastian stepped away to search for online tips that would help their game progress. Sebastian walked out through the kitchen at 3:40 a.m., going to the computer when an unknown assailant slipped in through an unlocked side door. Without warning or provocation, the deafening sound of gunshots would ring out through the home. Sebastian's friend Brian heard the sound, but did not realize it was a gunshot. In the safety of Sebastian's home, the idea that it could have been that kind of violence seemed unfathomable. It was not until he heard the panicked calls to 911 from Sebastian's parents that he realized something was terribly wrong. Sebastian's father, Boris Axenius Sr., rushed to the scene upon hearing the gunshots. But by the time he made it to his son, it was too late. His life slipping away as his father desperately tried to staunch the bleeding. In those agonizing moments, his love was powerless against the senseless violence that had claimed his son's life. Sebastian was gone. In the aftermath of Sebastian Axenius' tragic demise, the Alachua County Sheriff's Office launched an intensive investigation. They wanted to unravel the circumstances surrounding the senseless act of violence that had shattered the tranquility of the Gainesville community and upended the lives of the Axenius family. With little to go on initially, detectives tirelessly pursued every lead. They meticulously combed through evidence and interviewed witnesses in search of answers, leaving Sebastian's family and friends devastated with grief. Then, Alachua County Sheriff spokesman Lieutenant Steve Maynard said the following: "A few days after the shooting, we are very frustrated with this case. We do not have anything to go on. No viable suspect information, no motive, not even any information about how the shooter left the scene. Literally, we have nothing." As with seemingly all unsolved cases, Sebastian's demise soon faded from the public spotlight. A reward eventually grew to as much as $20,000, but tips still began to wane. In 2021, a glimmer of hope emerged as investigators uncovered new evidence that breathed new life into the long-dormant case. The breakthrough, while not disclosed in detail, provided a crucial piece of the puzzle that had eluded authorities for over a decade. With renewed determination, detectives worked tirelessly to follow up on the newfound lead. They were piecing together the intricate details of the crime and inching closer to identifying the perpetrator responsible for Sebastian's untimely demise. Months of meticulous investigation culminated in a significant development: the identification of a suspect with ties to Central Florida. Timothy Thomas, already serving a life sentence for unrelated charges, became the prime suspect. Thomas's criminal history, marked by a string of violent offenses, paints a chilling portrait of a man with a propensity for brutality. He had been arrested in Orlando in 2011 for armed robbery, kidnapping, and illegal substance charges, and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. But court documents show after he was released, he did not make it long before violating parole. A judge issued a warrant for Thomas's arrest, saying he had failed to notify his parole officer that he had moved. Law enforcement officers believe that is why, when a Monroe County deputy tried to stop him in a car with stolen plates in 2015, he opened fire. A deputy shot in the encounter survived, thanks to a ballistics vest. On December 23, 2023, a grand jury indicted Thomas on charges of burglary of a home and fatal slaying while engaged in trafficking. He is being held at the Alachua County Jail on a $1 million bond. His court-appointed public defender asked to withdraw from the case, citing an unnamed and irreconcilable conflict of interest, according to court documents. Law enforcement is still looking for a woman who loaned Thomas her car in 2010. They believe she was in the vehicle at the time of the slaying. We do not believe at this time that she had any prior knowledge of what Thomas had planned that night in 2010. Gainey asked for the public's help in finding the woman, whom he described as being Hispanic and very short. In 2010, she would have been 19 or 20 years old with a heavy build. The vehicle was a white or cream-colored Kia Sportage or similar style vehicle. Sheriff Gainey wanted to emphasize that the woman they were looking for was not in any trouble. They were just hoping to ask her some questions. In the wake of Sebastian's tragic slaying, his family has endured years of anguish, grappling with the relentless ache of his absence with each passing day, and ask him why he did what the sheriff's office says he did. I want him to know how much damage he did. Maybe he does not care, but I want him to know what he did, how much pain he caused my family. While the prospect of Thomas facing consequences for his actions may offer a measure of relief, it pales in comparison to the void left by Sebastian's untimely departure. For Sebastian's parents and their loved ones, the pain of their loss transcends any legal retribution. During the press conference held on February 5, 2024, Boris Jr. said, "This happened in the home where you were supposed to feel safe as a 16-year-old. He was not out partying on a Friday. He was playing video games with his best friend, So it is understandable that this was not a cause of a child that was looking for trouble or something to get into. Simply he was in the safest place he was supposed to be. We hope as a family that you can help us get to the final chapter of this, which is bringing my brother justice. It has been, as they mentioned, 13.5 years we have been suffering through this. My family, my parents. He was only 16 years of age. His life was stolen. If you could please help us bring this to justice and bring this person forward so the last loose ends can be tied and we can move forward with ending this for my family, I would appreciate it. No courtroom verdict, no matter how just, can take away the pain in their hearts or fill the void left by Sebastian's absence. In a township of North Whitehall, Pennsylvania, a brutal act of violence shattered the peace over 3 decades ago. Rose Nath, a beloved 78-year-old widow, was found viciously stabbed and beaten in her ransacked home. The chilling discovery, made by her nephew when she failed to appear at church, left investigators and her family grappling with unanswered questions. Now, with the progress of groundbreaking DNA technology, new light has been shed on this cold case and has led to an arrest. Rose Nath was born in the early 1910s in the Lehigh Valley area of Pennsylvania. Raised in a modest family, Rose's early years were marked by the values of hard work, faith, and community. She grew up during a time of drastic change in America, witnessing the Great Depression and World War II, times that would instill in her a sense of resilience and determination. Rose would meet her husband, Michael Nath, in the late 1930s. The couple married and settled in North Whitehall Township, where they built a life together. Michael worked in various local industries, while Rose found employment at the D&D Shirt, a well-known local business that provided steady work for many in the community. Rose dedicated several decades of her life to the factory, where she was known for her strong work ethic and friendly demeanor. Despite not having children of their own, Rose and Michael were deeply connected to their extended family. Rose took great joy in being an aunt and great-aunt, often spending time with the children in her family. As a devoted Catholic, Rose was an active member of St. John the Baptist Church in Northampton. She attended Mass regularly and participated in various church activities. Her faith was a cornerstone of her life, providing her with a strong sense of purpose and community. Rose was known to be generous with her time, often volunteering for church events and helping those in need. After retiring from the D&D Shirt factory, Rose continued to lead a fulfilling life. She enjoyed gardening, cooking, and spending time with her friends and family. Her home, nestled along the banks of the Lehigh River, was a peaceful retreat, and while she seemed to have a very quiet lifestyle, Rose remained vigilant and active. Her home was filled with cherished memories and mementos of her life with Michael, who had passed away a few years before her own life would come to an end in one of the most unimaginable and horrific ways. January 21, 1989 began like any other for Rose. Despite the recent burglary at her home just after Christmas, Rose maintained her routine, leaning on her faith and family for comfort. That morning, Rose did not appear at St. John the Baptist Church for her regular Sunday service. Known for her unwavering commitment to her faith, Rose's absence was immediately noticeable. Concerned, her family decided to check on her well-being. Her nephew, who often looked out for her, went to her home to ensure she was safe. Upon entering the house, Rose's nephew was faced with a horrifying scene that would forever be etched in his memory. The normally tidy living room was in disarray, indicating a struggle had taken place. Blood stains covered various surfaces and the room had been ransacked. It was clear that Rose had fought valiantly against her attacker. Tragically, Rose was found lifeless, having been subjected to a brutal and violent assault. She had been stabbed 28 times and bludgeoned, suffering multiple blunt force injuries. Her body bore the signs of defensive wounds, suggesting she had tried to fend off her assailant with every ounce of her strength. One of the weapons used in the attack, a knife, was found discarded outside the home, hinting that the perpetrator was hasty in fleeing the scene. As news of Rose's tragic demise spread, the community was plunged into mourning. Friends, neighbors, and fellow churchgoers were stunned by the senseless act of violence that had claimed the life of a beloved member of their community. The initial response from the Pennsylvania State Police and the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office was quick. Detectives, including Robert Devers and Thomas McAndrew, arrived at the crime scene to begin their investigation. The brutality of the crime shocked the seasoned investigators, who immediately realized the severity of the case. Inside Rose's home, detectives meticulously collected evidence, hoping to find any clue that could lead them to the perpetrator. The ransacked nature of the home suggested a burglary, yet the excessive violence indicated a deeper motive. Any physical evidence that might yield clues to who was behind Rose's end was collected from the scene. Items of particular interest included the knife found outside, a pellet gun, also believed to have been used in the attack, and various objects inside the home that might have the unknown assailant's DNA. At the time, DNA technology was in its infancy, but the investigators preserved all potential evidence with the foresight that future advancements might unlock critical information. Blood samples, fibers, and other trace evidence were carefully cataloged and stored for further analysis. Investigators conducted extensive interviews with Rose's family, friends, and neighbors. They looked into her routine, any recent changes in her life or potential conflicts and threats she might have faced. The burglary just after Christmas was a significant point of interest, and detectives worked to determine if there was a connection between that incident and her violent demise. Initially, several theories emerged. The previous burglary suggested that Rose's home might have been targeted specifically, possibly by someone who knew her or was familiar with her routines. The excessive violence raised the possibility of a personal vendetta or a crime of passion, but without concrete evidence or witnesses, the theories remained speculative. Rose's funeral was a somber event, with those who had known her full of grief and disbelief, displaying the terror-stricken expression she wore in her final moments. It was a heartbreaking sight that some family members could not bear to witness, choosing not to attend. The investigation faced challenges, and while leads were followed and persons of interest were questioned, no definitive connections could be made. As weeks turned into months, the case began to lose momentum, and the lack of new leads and inability to connect the evidence to a specific individual caused the investigation to come to a standstill. Throughout the years, investigators stayed committed to solving Rose's case, and 33 years after Rose's horrifying end, that dedication would finally pay off. In 2018, the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office and the Pennsylvania State Police decided to re-examine the evidence from Rosenath's case using the new DNA techniques. Detectives collaborated with forensic experts to analyze the evidence, focusing particularly on items that might contain touch DNA. Touch DNA analysis allowed forensic scientists to extract genetic material from surfaces that had been touched or handled by the perpetrator. The knife and the pellet gun found near Rose's home, as well as other items from the crime scene, were re-examined. Using this technology, scientists were able to obtain DNA profiles from the collected evidence. Those profiles were then compared against databases of known offenders. The breakthrough came when a DNA profile from the crime scene matched that of Michael Breisch, a name previously unknown in connection with the case. At the time of Rosenath's slaying, Breisch had been living in a community corrections facility in Allentown, Pennsylvania, not far from North Whitehall Township. He was 30 years old at the time of the crime and had a criminal history that included burglary and other offenses. Investigators began to piece together Breisch's movements and actions around the time of the crime. They discovered that just 10 days after Rose's violent end, Breisch had been arrested for escaping from the community corrections facility where he was supposed to be living. This information, combined with the DNA evidence, provided a compelling link to the crime. It was also revealed that Breisch had no known personal connection to Rose, which meant that the attack had likely been opportunistic rather than targeted. In May 2024, armed with the new evidence, authorities located 65-year-old Michael Breisch living in Coshocton County, Ohio. He had moved there after spending several years in Pennsylvania. Local law enforcement, in coordination with Pennsylvania authorities, apprehended Breisch and charged him with the slaying of Rosenath. Breisch was extradited to Pennsylvania, where he faced charges including criminal fatal violence, burglary, robbery, and other related offenses. Lehigh County Jail. The arrest of Michael Bryce has brought a sense of relief and closure to Rosenath's family and the North Whitehall Township community. For over 3 decades, they had lived with the anguish of not knowing who had ended Rose's life. The diligent work of investigators, combined with advancements in DNA technology, had finally provided the answers they sought. Now, as Bryce awaits his day in court, the family is one step closer to finding justice. In the streets of West Valley City, Utah, a heinous crime remained unsolved for 3 decades. Lisa Redmond, a devoted mother and diligent Pizza Hut delivery driver, met a tragic fate one fateful night in 1996. Found slain in her uniform on a deserted roadside, the circumstances surrounding her demise puzzled investigators for years. With leads scarce and the trail gone cold, the case seemed destined to fade into obscurity until a breakthrough in forensic technology. Lisa Redmond lived in West Valley City, Utah, where she grew up with a strong sense of community and family values. After serving in the U.S. Army, Lisa married James Redmond in 1987, and together they built a life centered around their 2 children, Megan and Nathan. Lisa worked night shifts to support her family, balancing her role as a Pizza Hut delivery driver with volunteering at a local school, where she dedicated her time to teaching children how to read. Her compassion, work ethic, and devotion to her family would leave a lasting impression on those that knew her. No one could have predicted the tragedy that would soon follow. On a fateful December evening in 1996, Lisa Redmond began her normal routine as a Pizza Hut delivery driver. It was a typical night, with Lisa's usual diligence and warm demeanor as she set out to fulfill deliveries. Little did anyone know this ordinary work shift would take a devastating turn. Lisa's last known moments were at 9:45 p.m., when she left the Pizza Hut near 3100 S 5200W to deliver an order to a nearby hotel. But as the hours passed, concerns grew when Lisa failed to return. Her absence raised alarms among colleagues and loved ones, prompting a frantic search. Lisa's truck would be discovered abandoned in a church parking lot just over a mile from where she would eventually be found. The grim discovery came shortly after, when her lifeless body would be found on the roadside near 5200 West 3100 South. She was still wearing her Pizza Hut uniform. The shock and grief echoed through the community as Lisa's family grappled with the loss of a beloved wife and mother. Following the discovery of Lisa's body, the West Valley City Police Department launched into action. Initial investigations centered around piecing together Lisa's final moments. Her colleagues at Pizza Hut provided crucial details recounting the time she left the restaurant to deliver an order to a nearby hotel. The timeline was meticulously reconstructed, tracing her route and the critical minutes leading up to her disappearance. The investigation honed in on Lisa's abandoned truck, found eerily parked in a church parking lot not far from where her body was located. Inside the vehicle, detectives meticulously cataloged evidence of a struggle. A bloodied knife concealed behind the driver's seat and signs of a violent altercation inside the truck painted a grim picture of the events that would take Lisa's life. Evidence of blood underneath the truck suggested that Lisa had been run over. Forensic experts combed through the scene, collecting every shred of potential evidence. They documented bloodstains, scrutinized the vehicle for fingerprints, and gathered any trace that could shed light on who might have been responsible for Lisa's tragic demise. In the midst of the investigation, the community rallied together, offering tips and support to law enforcement in the hopes of bringing justice to Lisa Redmond and closure to her grieving family. But despite the initial flurry of activity and leads, the case soon grew cold, leaving investigators grasping for answers in a case that would haunt them for decades to come. Eventually, the case seemed to gradually slip into obscurity, but in 1999, just a few years after Lisa's brutal slaying, her family would be hit by another tragedy. Lisa's husband, James Redmond, lost his life in a car accident near Fort Collins, Colorado. The tragic loss of James reignited public interest in Lisa's unsolved slaying. prompting renewed efforts by authorities to seek justice for the Redmond family. During this period, the local media spotlight intensified, casting a new wave of attention on the case. Pizza Hut responded to the community's outcry by increasing the reward for information about the case. The initial reward of $5,000 was doubled to $10,000, encouraging witnesses to come forward with any overlooked details that could help in solving the mystery. But even with the renewed interest and occasional media coverage, leads grew stale, witnesses moved away, and the case files gathered dust. The once promising investigation faded into a cold case for nearly 2 decades before a breakthrough would crack the case wide open. This turning point came in 2024, when forensic technology identified critical evidence linking a man named Donald Eugene Young Jr. to the crime scene. He was then charged for taking the life of Lisa Redmond. Specifically, DNA recovered from a seat belt buckle inside Lisa's truck was found to match Young's genetic profile. Investigators got Young's DNA back in 2002, but only questioned him in 2019. This discovery provided a link that had eluded investigators for years, breathing new life into the cold case. Fingerprints recovered from a knife found in the truck also matched those of Young, solidifying the connection between the suspect and the violent altercation that had resulted in Lisa's untimely demise. Young, already serving a 30 years to life sentence for unrelated crimes, including assault, emerged as the prime suspect in Lisa Redmond's case. His criminal history includes previous federal allegations for the slaying of 3 prostitutes in St. Louis, which were dismissed. Also, a dismissed but still open case for the 1999 slaying of Amy Quinton. This known history of violence and criminal activity across state lines added weight to the newly uncovered evidence in Lisa's case. It painted a clearer picture of the events that had transpired on that fateful December night in 1996. The West Valley Police Department, in collaboration with prosecutors from the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office, worked tirelessly to build a case against Young. They were aiming to finally bring closure to the Redmond family and deliver long-awaited justice. The revelation of Young's involvement brought a mix of emotions, relief for those who had tirelessly sought answers, and a reminder of the impact of violent crime on families and communities. As the legal process unfolded, the significance of the forensic breakthrough highlighted the way evolving technology can be used to resolve cold cases and hold perpetrators accountable, even decades after their crimes have been committed. In 1974, in the secluded woods of Ladard, Connecticut, a chilling discovery would be made when 2 bodies were found in a shallow grave, their identities unknown. A woman known only by her alias would not be identified for nearly 5 decades. After years of mystery and questions about who this woman really was, advances in technology and relentless investigative pursuit were finally able to unveil her true identity. In the spring of 1974, on May 30th, Connecticut State Police received a cryptic tip that led them deep into the secluded woods behind a nondescript home on Shoeville Road. As they meticulously combed through the dense underbrush, their efforts were rewarded with a chilling discovery. A shallow grave carefully concealed beneath layers of fallen leaves and earth. Inside this makeshift tomb laid the remains of 2 individuals, their bones weathered by time and the elements. The man was quickly identified as Gustavus Lee Carmichael, a known serial bank robber who had previously escaped federal custody. But the woman's identity remained elusive. Investigators sifted through the clues found with her remains. She was dressed in a tan leather wet-look vest, a gold or tan sweater, a brown tweed skirt, and brown granny boots. Alongside these clothes were pieces of jewelry, including a pendant and rings. One ring had the letters JHSN monogram, the initials ILN and the date 1917 engraved inside, while another ring was an inexpensive piece with a fake emerald stone. Despite these tangible clues, the woman's identity could not be found due to the extent of decomposition and her use of aliases. Investigators knew she had gone by the name Lorraine Stahl, but this alias and others she might have used did not yield any solid leads. The case grew cold over the years. In 2011, the woman's case data, dental x-rays, and a description were uploaded to the NamUs, and her DNA was submitted to Cody's in 2012, but no matches were found. In a renewed effort to solve the case in July 2022, forensic evidence was sent to Othram. Othram developed a comprehensive DNA profile using forensic-grade genome sequencing. This advanced method allowed for more detailed analysis compared to previous efforts. In January 2024, Othram's work led investigators to a potential relative of the unidentified woman. Born on September 4, 1946, from Louisville, Kentucky. Conversations with her family confirmed her presence in the Northeast in the years leading up to her disappearance. Linda's daughter provided a DNA sample, which conclusively identified the remains as those of Linda Sue Childers in February 2024. Little is known about Linda's early life, but by the time she reached her 20s, Linda's life had taken a tumultuous turn. She became involved with Gustavus Lee Carmichael, and under the name Lorraine Stahl, went on the run with him in an attempt to evade law enforcement as they moved from place to place. In the late 1960s, Linda and Gustavus' criminal activities eventually led them to they robbed a New Jersey bank a few days before Christmas. Seeking refuge, they stayed at the home of Richard DeFratis and his common-law wife, Joanne Ranello. During the time that Linda was at the DeFratis home, she expressed fears to Joanne about the life she was leading. She told her that she was nervous about using fictitious names and was afraid of being caught by the police and what she might say if she were apprehended. Tensions rose within the group, and on December 31, 1970, Linda and Gustavus' lives were brutally ended. DeFratis and his accomplice Donald Brandt feared that Linda might reveal their criminal activities if apprehended, and decided to silence her. They were also bank robbers and thieves. Gustavus was also slain, as his protective nature made it impossible for the perpetrators to target Linda without eliminating him. After their untimely demise, Linda and Gustavus were buried in a shallow grave behind the house on Shoeville Road, where their remains would lie undiscovered for nearly 40 years. Joanne was the person who tipped off the police. DeFratis and Brandt were subsequently convicted of the slayings, but both of them have since passed away. The identification of Linda Sue Childers brought long-awaited closure to her family, who had wondered about her fate for over 50 years. Her daughter and sister, informed of the discovery, were finally able to lay her to rest properly. Linda's story, though marked by tragedy, also serves as a reminder of the power of modern forensic science in solving even the most challenging cold cases. In the desolate expanse near the U.S. Highway 95 in rural Churchill County, Nevada, two passersby stumbled upon a gruesome discovery in May 2008. Skeletal remains, partially buried in a shallow grave. For over a decade, the identity of the victim remained a mystery, her name unknown. It was not until a groundbreaking collaboration between forensic experts and cutting-edge genetic technology that the truth was revealed and a family would finally find closure. On a spring day in May 2008, two passersby ventured off the beaten path where they came across skeletal remains partially buried, covered with dirt and gravel. Nearby, an orange halter top lay abandoned. The Churchill County Sheriff's Office responded swiftly, launching an investigation into what could have happened. The remains were transported to the Washoe County Medical Examiner's Office, where a forensic pathologist determined that the victim was an adult female. She had passed away as a result of multiple gunshot wounds, an unmistakable slaying. Even with the best efforts of law enforcement and forensic experts, the case quickly grew cold. The details of the case were entered into NamUs under the identifier UP 8110, a digital memorial to the unknown woman. Investigators scoured missing persons reports, compared dental records, and examined any potential leads. But each promising lead seemed to end in a halt. The orange halter top found near the remains, initially thought to be a crucial clue, was provided no significant breakthroughs. Year after year, the file on the unidentified woman gathered dust. Investigators driven by a commitment to justice and closure never gave up hope. They continued to review the case periodically, hoping advancements in forensic science might eventually provide the answers they sought. They also hoped that someone, somewhere, might come forward with the crucial piece of information that would crack the case wide open. The unidentified woman's case was one of many waiting for the right combination of technology, expertise, and opportunity to bring her story to light. In 2023, after years of stagnation, the case of the unidentified woman from Churchill County took a shocking turn. The Washoe County Regional Medical Examiner's Office partnered with OTHRM. This collaboration would be the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation. OTHRM scientists employed forensic-grade genome sequencing to develop a comprehensive DNA profile from the skeletal remains. This advanced technique allowed them to extract a high-quality DNA sample, even from degraded remains. The DNA profile was then compared against profiles in consumer genealogical databases, with consent for law enforcement use. Although this type of analysis does not yield a direct identification, it generates powerful investigative leads by identifying potential relatives. The genetic genealogy search provided a promising lead that pointed to a potential relative of the unidentified woman. The examiner's office followed up on this lead, contacting the individual and explaining the situation. The potential relative agreed to provide a DNA sample for direct comparison. Using their advanced technology, OTHRM compared the DNA samples and confirmed a positive match. The unidentified woman was finally given a name in 2024, Betty Lou Jappel. Betty Lou, who was 70 years old at the time of her untimely passing, had vanished under mysterious circumstances in 2006. Originally from McMinnville, Oregon, she and her longtime partner, Kenneth William Miller, had led a nomadic lifestyle, traveling in their motorhome and truck. She and Kenneth never married, but they had been together for about 30 years. Their travels took them to Quartzville, Arizona, where they were last seen. In mid-2006, their motorhome was found abandoned in a remote area near Redmond, Oregon, and their truck turned up in Montana. The last activity on their bank accounts was in June 2006, and they were last known to be in the company of a friend, Gregory Allen Groundhog Cole. Was involved in a shootout with police in Quartzville in May 2007, and was later found lifeless from a self-inflicted gunshot wound near the Mexican border. In June 2007, Kenneth Miller's body was discovered in a shallow grave near the abandoned motorhome in Oregon, but there was no sign of Betty Lou. It is believed that Cole took the lives of Kenneth and Betty Lou. It was only through the relentless efforts of investigators and the innovative genetic genealogy that her remains, found 1,000 miles away in Nevada, were finally identified. The identification of Betty Lou Jappel, achieved through advanced forensic techniques, brings closure to her family after years of questions and uncertainty. Nobody would have expected the tragedy of 4 lives being taken in Calgary, the coldest region of Canada. 4 young girls were taken long before their time. Their families had given up on justice long ago, until it arrived decades later, thanks to advancements in technology. But who were these 4 victims? Eva Dvorak was an energetic type of girl. She had a bubbly personality and would take the spotlight in any room. Full of energy, she hardly ever stayed still, as recalled by her friends and family. She was one of the cousins they loved to hang out with. Always singing and dancing, she put a smile on everyone's face. Eva often went swimming or roller skating with her sisters and cousins and had a big circle of friends for a girl her age. Eva was 14 years old and an 8th grade student at Ian Baseljet Junior High School in Calgary. She made a friend in school, Patsy McQueen. Eva's home was located in a small cul-de-sac. It was a bungalow-style duplex positioned on the outer edge of the neighborhood with the front view facing a walking path. She and Patsy lived within walking distance of the school. Patsy was born Patricia McQueen on September 2, 1961. The daughter of Alastair and Sarah McQueen, Patsy was born into a big family with 10 siblings, 6 sisters and 4 brothers. Patsy loved baseball and, like any teen, was into music and dancing. She had a great sense of humor and loved to play pranks. She always talked about traveling, saying she could not wait to grow up and see the world. Patsy loved to make people laugh and smile. On the afternoon of February 12, 1976, Eva Dvorak and Patsy McQueen left class and hung out at their friends' homes. They were going to spend the weekend partying. But a couple of days passed and they did not touch base at home. No visit, no call. Their parents got worried and reached out to law enforcement. A missing persons report was filed for them and a search ensued. Some students at the school were interviewed and mentioned illegal substance use both during and after school. Things like marijuana and some chemicals, but nothing hardcore like needle substances. They agreed that both girls were involved in these activities. With Eva looking up to Patsy, the police asked around and realized they had disappeared at night. The girls were last seen around midnight on February 15th, walking near 9th Avenue and 12th Street, southeast in Calgary, heading towards downtown. Unfortunately, there was no need to recover the missing girls, as they were found in the grimmest way possible. A Calgary resident found them at 10:30 a.m. Their bodies were discovered under the Happy Valley underpass west of Calgary. The man found them lying together, fully clothed, with no obvious signs of assault. Despite extensive investigations, including witness interviews, examination of tire impressions, and toxicology tests, no illegal substances were found, and the manner of their passing was determined to be asphyxia. In short, they simply stopped breathing just like that. The autopsy did not find anything significant to explain their end. It was simply a deduction. 6 weeks after the tragedy, a newspaper article printed some gossip. It said the girls took illegal substances willingly. It also said they smoked marijuana and had a few drinks. It painted them in a strange light, alleging that the girls had been asked to leave school on Friday noon because they had alcohol on their breath. The article further explained that the girls hopped parties, going to new parties all weekend long, staying with friends, drinking and doping. A neighbor saw the teens on 9th Avenue and stopped to offer them a ride, which they refused. It almost made it sound like it was their fault as to what happened to them. Whatever the case was, they were minors and incapable of making decisions. Melissa Rehorek, 20, moved to Calgary from Windsor and lived at a downtown YMCA while working as a housekeeper at a nearby hotel. Her friends and family describe her as an adventurous and hardworking person. She was a positive girl who trusted people a little too easily, the sort of person to see good in everyone. Since she loved hiking and traveling, she once traveled to Banff to be close to nature and explore Canada a little. Enjoying the outdoors, she told friends she planned to hitchhike west for a weekend in the mountains. Melissa left on the evening of September 15, 1976. As her roommates said goodbye, she had no idea this was the last time she would see Melissa. It was normal for her to go hitchhiking out of the city during her days off. Clad in a blue denim jacket and denim skirt, she wore a red blouse and around 8:30 p.m. was off to get a ride. A Calgary Transit driver possibly dropped her off near Highway 1 in the Bonus area. It is a laid-back suburban area close to some great natural spots. It is right by the Bow River and touches Bonus Park, which is perfect for picnicking, boating, and even ice skating in the winter. There is a mix of homes, local shops, and community spots. Plus, it is very convenient for getting onto Highway 1, the Trans-Canada Highway, to head west toward the mountains. The very next day, a hiker came across something unusual about 22 kilometers west of Calgary. At 10:50 a.m., he realized it was a body. Police identified her as Melissa Rehorek. She was discovered in a ditch off a remote gravel road. Evidence suggested a struggle, and an autopsy revealed she passed of asphyxia and had suffered a blow to the head. Investigators found long black hair strands in her hand, which were not hers. Despite hair analysis, no suspect was identified. It seems Melissa may have encountered her assailant while hitchhiking. The struggle and evidence of strangulation indicate a violent attack, possibly by someone with long black hair, who remained unidentified for nearly half a century. Many years after her body was recovered, police tried to analyze the DNA from that hair in the 90s. Unfortunately, they were not able to identify it at the time, as there was no particular national database available. Being alone in a city can be dangerous, as we talk about Barbara McLean's tragic story. She left the town of Inverness, Nova Scotia for a few reasons, the biggest one being that a former mining town was no place for a high school graduate, as it did not have many opportunities. Barbara was a smart girl and wanted to build a life for herself. She had been in Calgary for about 6 months. She lived with her brothers, Bobby and Jim, and started out working at a restaurant and later a bank. According to her father, Barbara was homesick and had plans to go home for a 2-week visit in early March. She might even go back to college, she told her parents. But sadly, that was never meant to be. On February 25th, she was out with friends at a cabaret at the Highlander bar. She had argued with her boyfriend and decided to hitchhike home. She was last seen walking alone from the hotel in the early hours the following morning. About 6 hours later, her body was found by a dog walker near 6th Street and 80th Avenue, northeast of Calgary. Evidence showed that Barbara had fought back against her assailant. Blood was found on her left hand and foreign hair strands were discovered on her body, which had multiple marks and bruises. She had been strangled. In the months after his daughter was strangled, Dr. Jim McLean predicted that the case would be solved. He was confident that the perpetrator would be behind bars, stating that it might take 2 or 3 years, but the man would eventually be found. The perpetrator was thought to have gone away in a taxi after the incident, as there was no other way back, no bus or subway or train. Despite extensive investigations, including interviewing hundreds of taxi drivers and collecting over 600 hair samples within a year, the case went cold. Barbara's case caused fear. The risks and vulnerability of being alone in a city, especially late at night, scared girls her age. Dr. Jim McLean passed away in 2000, but his prediction finally came true years later. There were weak attempts in the 90s. Patsy and Eva's case was thought to have an intimate motive. The investigation into the tragedies of Eva Dvorak, Patsy McQueen, Melissa Rehorick, and Barbara McLean spanned several decades and involved some big efforts by the Alberta RCMP. They incorporated advancements in forensic technology and investigative techniques. Evidence lifted from all 4 victims was submitted to the RCMP's National Forensic Lab Services for testing. Male DNA was discovered at all 3 crime scenes, but at that time, the technology to develop a DNA profile from this evidence did not exist. Despite this limitation, the similarities between the cases of Melissa Rehorick and Barbara that the same individual was responsible for both cases. This suspicion became a focal point of the investigation. For the next 40 years, the Alberta RCMP persisted in their efforts to identify the person or persons responsible for these tragedies. The cases were never closed, and investigators continually reassessed the files as new information became available, and police techniques evolved. A breakthrough occurred in 2003 with the advent of enhanced DNA analysis. Utilizing these new techniques, police were able to confirm that the same suspect was linked to both Melissa Rehorick and Barbara McLean's cases through DNA evidence. However, when the suspect's DNA was compared against the National DNA Databank, there was no match. The profile was uploaded into the databank, but it went without a hit for over 20 years. The internet was in its initial phases back then. Cloud storage would come up much later. In May of 2024, they finally unmasked the assailant. After a lot of effort, the RCMP, using information obtained through investigative genetic genealogy, initiated a cross-border investigation into Gary Allen Sreer, a United States citizen born in 1942. He lived the life of a transient, changing his appearance and living on aliases to disguise his identity. His criminal record dates back to 1966 relating to intimate crimes against women. A man with a history of assault-related offenses fled to Canada in 1974 after posting bail for an assault charge in California. In Calgary during 1976 and 1977, he lived under aliases such as Willie Blackman, and Sreer frequently changed his appearance, homes, and cars to evade detection. He lived in Alberta and British Columbia from the mid-1970s until his deportation in 2003. His ability to adapt and blend into new environments allowed him to continue his criminal endeavors as he escaped his notorious past. He was in jail serving a sentence in Idaho for intimate assault in 2011 when he passed away of natural causes. Police were then able to deduce what might have happened. They knew Sreer was a predator and stalked his victims in his car. He would mark young girls hitchhiking on the road, usually younger ones like teens. He would satisfy his desires and dispose of them on the road. Sreer was known to be charismatic. In his 30s, when the assaults happened, it is possible that he developed trust, that he approached young girls as a kind stranger and then revealed his true face. DNA evidence confirmed him to be the common profile between Eva Violet Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rehorick, and Barbara McLean. RCMP has reason to believe these 4 girls were not his only victims. His name never appeared throughout investigations. 48 years for justice is a long time. Nearly half a century after the first investigations began, RCMP was able to uncover the truth for the surviving loved ones of the victims. While the unmasking of Gary Allen Srer cannot undo the pain and loss experienced by the victims' families, it does provide a sense of closure and underscores the vital role of modern technology in solving cold cases. The families of the victims thanked the authorities for their efforts in public statements, and while they never got to confront the perpetrator, they know at least that karma got to him and he served his time behind bars. Everyone was appalled when they learned that a 5-year-old had been beaten till she passed away. Someone close to her knew what happened, but was too frightened to save her or speak up. Why could her assailant not be convicted for a very long time? Harmony Renee Montgomery was born on June 7, 2014, to Crystal Sari and Adam Montgomery in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, her mother struggled with alcohol and illegal substance addiction. As a result of her mother's substance abuse, Harmony was born partially blind in her left eye and had special behavioral needs. Crystal was incapable of taking care of an infant, and her father Adam was in prison. Due to her parents' inability to get a hold of their lives and their struggles with substance abuse, Harmony was placed into foster care with Tim and Michelle Rafferty when she was just 2 months old. Harmony, who is described as a pleasant, kind girl with a big smile, became a big sister when her half-brother, Jameson, was born in 2016. Crystal also lost custody of Jameson and both children were placed in the same foster home. Harmony was a social, intelligent, and happy child who embraced her role as a caring big sister when she was only 2 years old, as described by her foster mother, Michelle. Unfortunately, Harmony never really stayed in one place. There was a constant tug-of-war between the CPS and her mother, Crystal. Each time Crystal felt well enough to take care of her children, she would get them back. They would end up being neglected and go back to the same foster care family. After the 3rd time, Harmony's foster family believed that the instability was causing her trauma. Her behavioral issues worsened each time she was removed from her placement. In 2018, Crystal completely lost control of Harmony and Jameson. Her original foster family, who loved her but felt unable to meet her needs, believed this was the best option. Bristol and child welfare authorities wanted Harmony to remain in foster care, but in February 2019, a judge granted custody to her father, Adam Montgomery. Adam had only been incarcerated during Harmony's first year and lived in New Hampshire afterwards. He got married to Kayla and they had children together. Adam and Harmony had seen each other irregularly, with Harmony having approximately 20 hours of supervised visits with Adam over 4 years. During these visits, Adam was attentive but sometimes had unrealistic expectations of her behavior, considering her age, visual disability, and special education needs. Both the CPS representative and Crystal felt he did not truly understand how to deal with her. Later, Blair Miller and Jonathan Bobbitt Miller adopted Jameson. Crystal called the police in November 2021, more than 2 years later. She told them that she had last seen her daughter on a video call in April 2019 and that Adam had been blocking her attempts to communicate with Harmony. She tried to get the family to let her speak to Harmony during Christmas 2019, but was unsuccessful. There was no doubt in her mind something must have happened with little Harmony. The detectives noted that on November 27, 2019, Adam and Kayla Montgomery, along with their 2 children and Harmony, were evicted from 77 Guilford Street in Manchester, New Hampshire. In an attempt to locate the missing child, police had to carefully approach the homeless family. Adam informed the police that Harmony has been staying with Crystal again since the end of November 2019. Kayla Montgomery was then arrested in January 2022 by Manchester police on charges of welfare fraud, accused of accepting $1,500 in food stamp benefits for Harmony. It was wrong to take food stamps in her name when she was staying with her mother. On April 4, 2022, authorities had the opportunity to arrest Adam on several charges relating to theft and possession of stolen items. He was accused of stealing a rifle and a shotgun, as well as receiving or retaining these stolen items. Adam faced charges of being a felon in possession of the rifle and shotgun, as well as being an armed career criminal due to his previous felonies. The alleged thefts took place between September 29 and October 3, 2019 in Manchester. Harmony's uncle, Kevin Montgomery, contacted the police department and reported seeing Harmony with a black eye during the summer of 2019, and that he questioned Adam about it. Adam admitted he had bashed her around the apartment after finding her trying to stop her baby half-brother from crying by covering his mouth. Kevin did not believe this for a second. Harmony was very kind to her baby brother, and she was not capable of harming him. Even if she would have done that, it was dangerous to give a minor a black eye. Kevin also witnessed other abusive behaviors by Adam, such as forcing Harmony to stand in a corner for 4 hours and making her scrub the toilet with her toothbrush. Concerned for Harmony's safety, the family reported to New Hampshire's Division of Children, Youth and Families, DCYF. Despite the urgency and severity of these reports, DCYF failed to take any action. Adam then cut off contact with the family because of their repeated reports. The failure of DCYF to respond to these urgent warnings should have made Harmony's case a priority. Witnesses saw Harmony with the couple in the days following the eviction. However, between December 6 and 10, 2019, Adam and Kayla were seen only with their children without Harmony. Even though Adam says that Harmony is staying with her mother, Crystal is still saying that she has not physically seen her child since Adam got custody. The case then went cold for a short while, as investigators had no leads. In June 2022, Kayla, Adam's wife, finally came clean about what exactly had happened to Harmony. Had taken the life of his firstborn, Harmony. The 5-year-old was no more. Kayla had been an illegal substance addict at the time. She also suffered domestic abuse at the hands of Adam. She lied about Harmony for years to protect Adam, whom she feared and strangely loved as well. She was afraid of what he could do to her and her children. Adam had instructed her to say that he had dropped her off to work at Dunkin' Donuts while he took Harmony to her mother, and that he had later picked her up. A quick call revealed Kayla did not work at Dunkin' Donuts at the time Harmony lost her life. Kayla recounted in November 2019 the family was evicted and forced to live out of their car. Harmony kept having toilet accidents in the car. She was not slow or dumb, she had behavioral issues because she had moved around so much. From one family to another, there was no place she could call home. And after losing the house the Montgomerys lived in, she struggled with potty training. Many children who have been physically abused or who do not have a home are unable to control their bowel movements. They wet the bed or have little control. Harmony's foster mother, Michelle, told jurors that Harmony was potty trained by the time she was 2.5 years old. On December 7, 2019, Harmony had another accident. The family was on their way to the Burger King parking lot to park the car for the night. Harmony had been struggling with going to the toilet for a while. She accidentally peed her pants and wet the car while Adam was driving. Frustrated, Adam flew into a fit of rage. He turned around in his seat and punched her 3 or 4 times. Whenever they stopped at a red light, he would turn around and deliver blows on her head. They stopped at least 2 red lights. Harmony moaned for about 5 minutes before the noises stopped. The couple thought nothing of it and welcomed the silence at first, but Kayla knew something was very wrong. Adam later said to her, "I think I heard her this time. I think I did something." Kayla and Adam did not realize she was no longer breathing until much later. The car broke down later that day and Adam had to pull over. He shook Harmony, but she was unresponsive. The little girl would usually go to sleep if Adam hit her, meaning this was routine for her, but this time he went too far. Adam then stuffed Harmony's body in a duffel bag, storing it in the trunk. Kayla was too afraid to say anything. He kept driving around, sometimes adding snow to slow decomposition. Kayla told authorities that Harmony's body was moved multiple times. At one point, it was hidden in a red cooler. The couple, needing a place to stay, had then gone to Kayla's mother's apartment building to store the cooler. Kayla's mother did not suspect anything. She just assumed it was the family's luggage. When the family moved into a shelter between December 30th and February 20th, 2020, Harmony's body was placed in a plastic bag and hidden in the ceiling. After neighboring residents of the shelter complained about the smell, Adam hid the body in a walk-in freezer at the pizza restaurant where he worked. Since Adam was a dishwasher and a cook at the pizzeria, he had access to the freezer. Nobody suspected anything. When the family finally moved to an apartment on Union Street, he took the body with them. In March 2020, Adam had a friend rent a U-Haul to move Harmony's body in the middle of the night. He then drove the U-Haul away, and Kayla did not know where the body went from there. Investigators later connected the dots and realized the U-Haul was driven to Tobin Bridge in Massachusetts. He might have dropped her in the Mystic River that flows under the bridge. The new charges against Adam included second-degree slaying for recklessly causing Harmony's demise, falsifying physical evidence, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with witnesses or informants by attempting to get Kayla to perjure herself. Kayla was then sentenced to 18 months in prison over perjury charges for lying under oath about Harmony's whereabouts at the beginning of the investigation. Prosecutors argue that on December 7, 2019, Adam Montgomery fatally beat his daughter Harmony due to a bathroom accident and then spent months manipulating and concealing her corpse to avoid detection. Through his defense attorney, he maintained his innocence, claiming he loved his daughter unconditionally and blamed Kayla for the child losing her life. He did admit to disposing of her body, but not that he had anything to do with her demise. The defense argued that there was not enough evidence to convict Adam of his daughter's slaying, while the prosecution claimed that he was responsible for Harmony's end. The trial brought attention to the issue of domestic violence and child abuse, as well as the importance of seeking justice for Harmony's disappearance. Adam denied all charges to the very end. Kayla, meanwhile, became a state witness who testified against her now ex-husband Adam, who she said was physically and emotionally abusive during their marriage. When he did show up in court, he was given a chance to reveal where Harmony's body was. Perhaps his charges would be reduced. Adam, 34 years old, chose to remain silent. Nevertheless, he was found guilty of second-degree slaying, second-degree assault, falsifying physical evidence, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with witnesses and informants in February 2024. He was given 45 years to life in prison on May 9, 2024. The only reason he was not convicted in the first degree was because little Harmony's body was never found. Harmony lost her life at the hands of the one person who was supposed to protect her. To this day, nobody knows for sure where Harmony's body has gone except for her cold-hearted father. Crystal Sari is grateful that the perpetrator is behind bars, but she vows not to rest until Harmony's body has been recovered. One can only hope that Harmony's tragedy will urge Child Protective Services to be more vigilant when it comes to abuse cases, because they can end in tragedy. Officers with the Barnstable Police Department responded to an emergency call on February 27 of 2011 about a possible shooting at a residence located in the 10 block of Fresh Holes Road in Hyannis. Hyannis is located on Massachusetts' Cape Cod Peninsula. Upon arriving at the scene, first responders located the body of 31-year-old Todd Lampley in a bedroom. He suffered what appeared to be several gunshot wounds. A handgun, believed to be used to commit the crime, was later found to have been tossed in a nearby pond. Unfortunately, finding the weapon did not lead investigators to the suspect, and the case went cold for some time. Investigators did, however, find that the crime had lots of references to a show called The Wire. They found a phone at the crime scene, which was attached to the name Marlo Stanfield. Marlo Stanfield is the name of a fictional character in the show, and who headed up the most ruthless and feared drug ring in Baltimore. Todd was inside of his home at night when he was shot by someone standing outside of his bedroom window. Another link to The Wire. In season 1 of the show, a fictitious woman who is cooperating with police is shot when the shooter stands outside of her window at night, taps the glass to get her attention, waits for her to approach the window, then fires a fatal shot into the home. Authorities also reported that they recovered a sweet potato from the scene of the fatal shooting. In season 4 of The Wire, one of the fictional police investigators solves a case in which the shooter used a potato as a makeshift silencer when fatally shooting his victim. Recently, with advances in DNA technology, the sweet potato was sent for DNA analysis. It was then discovered that DeVaris Hampton's DNA was on the sweet potato. In addition to the DNA evidence, Hampton was wearing a court-ordered GPS device that tracked his whereabouts at the time of Todd's slaying. The location data from that device placed Hampton at the Fresh Holes Road residence at the approximate time the crime was committed and later at the pond where the gun was recovered. With Hampton testifying in court that Todd was involved in the July 2007 slaying of Jacka Sellers in the same neighborhood. Sellers was also shot inside his home by someone shooting through a window from outside. This all led to 40-year-old DeVaris Hampton being arrested on February 24 of 2023 and charged with taking the life of Todd Lampley. Hampton appeared in Barnstable District Court, where he entered a plea of not guilty. He is scheduled to appear in court again on April 5 of 2023. In August of 1980, two field workers in Solano County, California found the body of a woman in a field in unincorporated Dixon around 20 miles southwest of Sacramento. The unknown woman suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the head and neck. For more than 10 years, she remained unidentified, listed in county records as only Jane Doe. In 1992, the victim was identified, thanks to the National Missing Persons Unit, as 21-year-old Holly Ann Campiglia from New Jersey. Holly Ann began running away from home when she was an 18-year-old freshman at Glassboro State College in New Jersey. Holly Ann's mother claimed that issues had began the year before while she was a senior in high school. That's when she began taking drugs and having emotional problems. When Holly Ann ran away the first time, she was found a month later walking on Route 70, about a mile away from the family home on Forest Hill Road off Springdale Road. She would go on to run away for more times. Each time she came back, she was less responsive to the medical treatment that she took for emotional problems, said Mrs. Campiglia. Her mother says the last time she saw her daughter was when she jumped from the car while going to a counseling center on June 10, 1980. She said she wanted to get on with her life. I want to see the world and do things my way. I tried to pull her back, but the car was on Route 70 near the Sheraton Post and I couldn't hold on to her. Her mother informed the Cherry Hill Police Department. We didn't hear from her for a month until we got a letter. It said she was living with two guys. We should try not to think of her anymore. We tried to trace the letter, but the return address wasn't a real street. The letter was mailed from Sacramento in July of 1980. All further leads went cold. Even though the sheriff's office identified her in 1992, they had no idea who was responsible for taking Holly Ann's life. In 2021, Holly Ann's family asked the Solano County Sheriff's Office to review the case and resubmit any original evidence for DNA analysis. That's exactly what investigators did. A few months later, their office received a report from the Serological Research Institute stating that male DNA was found on pieces of evidence that was collected back in 1980. Officials submitted that DNA to another database with the San Mateo Crime Lab in California and discovered that it belonged to someone already doing time for a serious crime. That man is Herman Lee Hobbs, who looks like something you'd find in a pyramid. Investigators found that 76-year-old Hobbs was serving a significant prison sentence for taking someone's life in 1975, for which he was convicted in 2005 in Sacramento. He assaulted and fatally stabbed 13-year-old Terry Pata in 1975. Terry vanished on the way home from her school in Rio Linda, which is a Sacramento suburb. Her body was found several days later, stuffed in a drain pipe. Hobbs also had been charged with taking the life of 29-year-old Brenda Ann Tucker, who went missing in 1994 from her home in Oroville. Loggers found her skull with a bullet hole in it in 2001 in Yuba County and DNA identified her. Hobbs, who knew her family, was charged with her slaying in 2001, but a judge dismissed the case the next year for lack of evidence. In February of 2023, an arrest warrant was issued by a Solano County Superior Court judge, along with a removal order to have Hobbs transferred from state prison to Solano County Jail to face the new charges for what he did to Holly, and officials think Hobbs may have committed other crimes and had this to say in their Facebook announcement. Detectives continue to work in collaboration with other Northern California agencies to potentially identify and/or solve additional cases that may be linked to Hobbs. We are grateful to the Campiglia family for their patience and assistance, and to the labs whose new technology allowed additional testing of older evidence, and to the staff who worked tirelessly to help bring closure to a lifetime of waiting, the sheriff's office said. Anyone with information about the homicide is asked to contact the Solano Sheriff Investigations at 7077-847-050. The sheriff's office also wanted to give a special mention to the original deputy who investigated Holly Ann's case, Jose or Joe Cisneros. His life was taken in the line of duty in 1985. His hard work is still helping solve cases over 40 years later. In October of 2004, 28-year-old Keisha Brown's body was found in a bathtub inside her apartment in the 700 block of East Flamingo Road. An autopsy revealed that Keisha had been strangled, stabbed, and assaulted by an unknown attacker. Witnesses interviewed at the time provided a description of a possible suspect seen entering and leaving the apartment, but that person was never identified. Forensic evidence was collected at the crime scene, but was unable to help in identifying the suspect at the time. In July of 2022, Detective Dan Long reviewed Keisha's case. He requested for additional DNA testing of evidence located on Keisha's body during her autopsy. While working the case, Dan Long realized that there are a lot of similarities with crimes that took place in 2005. All of those crimes involved Norman Flowers. Flowers in 2011 had entered an Alford plea for charges against him that he took the lives of 45-year-old Mary Lee Coote and 24-year-old Reina Gonzalez. An Alford plea means Flowers didn't admit guilt but acknowledged prosecutors could prove their case against him. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to stipulate the 2 consecutive life prison terms without the possibility of parole instead of executing him. Mary Lee's body was found inside her Russell Road apartment on May 3 of 2005. She had been assaulted and strangled. Flowers' DNA was discovered on her body. 8 hours later, Rena's body was found in the same complex. She had been strangled with a telephone cord. In October of 2008, Flowers was convicted and given a life sentence because he took the life of 18-year-old Sheila Quarles also in 2005. Flowers had previously spent time in prison, had been paroled twice, and was out of prison for about 20 days when he took Sheila's life. With the crimes being so similar, Detective Dan Long was convinced that Norman Flowers was responsible for taking the life of Keisha Brown. It was only in February of 2023, however, when DNA linked Flowers to Keisha's crime scene, and that it could be confirmed that he is responsible. Metropolitan Police Department Lieutenant Jason Johansson made the announcement to the public. As Johansson spoke during the press conference, members of Keisha's family stood behind him, wiping tears from their eyes. Keisha's daughter, Kalia Brown, briefly spoke through tears. "I just want to say thank you to the police department," she said. Flowers remains at High Desert State Prison, where he is serving 3 life sentences. 30-year-old Deborah Lee Atrox lived in Salem, Oregon in 1988. She had an 8-month-old daughter with her husband, 34-year-old Robert Atrox. Robert was living in the couple's home in Sherwood, and Deborah lived in an apartment in Salem because by November of 1988, Deborah and Robert had been separated for 5 months. Robert went to pick up their daughter from a babysitter in Newberg, Oregon, while Deborah was at a hair appointment in Tigard. Deborah was expected to be home before 8 p.m., but she never showed up. Robert then called several friends and family members to see if they knew where Deborah was before reporting her missing to the Tigard Police Department. The next day, Robert told investigators he had still not heard from his wife. Deborah's car was then entered into the databases used by law enforcement as a vehicle connection to a missing person. Deborah's black Honda Accord was recovered by police officers in Beaverton, Oregon on December 1st of 1988. A city public works employee reported a suspicious abandoned car with keys in the driver's seat, located at the end of Southwest Murray Road. Witnesses said the car had been parked there since early on November 30th. The 2-door sedan also had its driver's side window down and was missing the license plates in the trunk of the car. Investigators discovered Deborah's body. She had been strangled based on the positioning of her body. It was determined that she had been placed there after her life was taken despite more than 3 decades of investigation. The case unfortunately went cold. Detectives with the Washington County District Attorney's Office Cold Case Unit reopened the case in 2021, about a year after forming a partnership with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. The Cold Case Unit was formed in 2020 after receiving a grant from the U.S. Department of Justice. For the next year and a half, investigators re-interviewed multiple witnesses and had forensic evidence re-examined. All of this led to Robert Atrops being charged with taking Deborah's life on February 28 of 2023, where he was indicted by a grand jury. He was booked into the Washington County Jail. Washington County District Attorney Kevin Barton had this to say: "I am proud of the work our cold case unit has done to ensure that victims and cases are not forgotten, despite the passage of time. Being able to use today's technology and apply it towards evidence that was seized over 30 years ago is a huge advantage in terms of challenges. We may think of these cases as old, or we may use the word cold, but if you talk to the family and friends of the victims of these cases, they're very current issues for them," Barton said. "They're still dealing with the trauma as a result of that crime." Barton also said that he can't give all the details that led to the arrest at this time, as it's still an ongoing investigation. On May 11 of 2007, 64-year-old Dennis Lee First's body was found at his apartment in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He had been stabbed and beaten. According to Tammy Mims, assistant manager for the Hawthorne Hills apartments where Dennis lived, said he had prostate cancer, didn't have many visitors, and lived on Social Security. Tammy said that when a friend called and asked her to check on Dennis, she notified Robert Gross, a maintenance employee at the apartments. Robert knocked several times on Dennis' door, and when no one answered, he entered the residence. Inside, he found Dennis lying face up on the bed, feet on the floor. Robert then saw all the blood and called 911. Evidence collected at the scene was sent to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation State Crime Lab in Ankeny for testing. Dennis' first wife, Christine Burmeister, said that he had a rough life. It's hard to believe somebody would stab him. He could hardly get around. Denise and Christine had 2 children. Their son Brad was born in 1963 and their daughter Laura in 1965. In the 1970s, the couple lived in Olin in Jones County, where Dennis worked as a purchasing agent at a Monticello steel company. He'd been living in Cedar Rapids since the couple's 1981 divorce. In 1990, Dennis had been arrested on charges of stealing from local businesses and for drunken driving. He'd also been accused of threatening a man from whom he rented a room. Things didn't get any better for Dennis after his son lost his life in 1993 in an auto accident. Dennis eventually lost touch with his daughter, ex-wife, and other relatives, but had begun calling them again a few years prior to his demise. In late May of 2007, Cedar Rapids police served 5 search warrants in the case, searching not only Dennis' apartment, but that of Curtis Pageant. Investigators took his fingerprints and a DNA sample with a swab from inside his cheek. They also took a pair of his boots from his apartment. Pageant was the last known person to have seen 15-year-old Aaron K. Pospisil, who went missing from Cedar Rapids on June 3 of 2001. Pageant, a friend of Aaron's older brother, told police that in 2001 he was leaving and agreed to give her a ride to her friend Britt's home. According to Pageant, when they arrived at Britt's house, no one answered the door, and Pageant claimed that as Aaron walked back to his truck, a black Chevrolet Cavalier with tinted rear windows pulled up to the curb. He said Aaron went up to the car and had a short conversation with someone, and then told him police could find no other witnesses to substantiate Pageant's story about a black Cavalier in the neighborhood, and Aaron has not been seen since leaving her home with Pageant. Finally, on March 1 of 2023, 42-year-old Curtis Randall Pageant was arrested and charged with taking Dennis First's life. Lynn County Attorney Nick Maybanks said this case was a testament to the Cedar Rapids Police Department's commitment to victims and the community. This case shows that the department persists in seeking justice for victims and survivors, even in cases that may be hidden from the public eye. After the department's cold case unit approached Maybanks to review the case, and after several Maybanks determined that Pageant was responsible for taking Dennis' life. Police didn't say what exactly led to Pageant's arrest, whether it was further DNA testing or something else. It was however later mentioned in the news conference that a partial blood boot print was found at Dennis' home that matches boots found at Paget's home. An oven mitt soiled with blood was also found. It contained both Dennis and Paget's DNA on the inside of the oven mitt. Paget's fingerprint was also found on a knife sharpener in Dennis' apartment in a drawer. There's been no updates on Erin's case, just a reliable sighting in the spring of 2002. Erin was spotted at a convenience store in Cedar Rapids. She was riding in the back seat of a car with Illinois license plates. This tip was provided to Cedar Rapids police. However, the car was not found. They have never been able to verify the sighting. The person who saw Erin knows her well and is still convinced that it was her. Erin is described as a Caucasian female, dark brown hair, dark brown eyes. Erin has a small scar above her eye and had red highlights in her hair at the time of her disappearance. If you have any information, please contact the Cedar Rapids Police. Please call the Cedar Rapids Police Department at this number.